Hello, crafters. Big D here, and this week we are talking about 2020, a crafting retrospective. So, as you may be able to see behind me, I got a lot of models sitting on the table. And what I've got behind me is everything I've painted in 2020. So, let's grab the camera. We're going to go kind of do a fly around on that, take a look at what I've painted in 2020. I'm going to warn you now, it's going to be kind of warbly. So, if you get motion sick, just put a finger in the ear, hold your breath, put a hand on your tummy, whatever you got to do. It's going to be a little warbly for a little bit as you see me going around this entirety of this table with everything I've got on there. So let's go check out what's on the table. So, all in all, I would say 2020 was a pretty good year.
Excuse me?
For painting.
I'll allow it.
In 2019, I painted just under 300 figures. And I made a goal for myself to do better in 2020. My goal was to do 365 figures in 2020.
I don't know if y'all can count this from where you're seeing, but I can tell you right now that is not 366.
I kind of crushed it.
Stupid.
Because of this, if you take the 16 that are not currently here, because they are in other places,
Stupid.
I have completed 550 figures, vehicles, and pieces of terrain in the year 2020.
Shut up. Just shut up.
Whether it was my new army, my orcs, my new old army, my death speakers, which are all pre-1996 Space Marines models, whether it's me getting into Warhammer Underworlds, finishing up my No Bolter November from 2019, and getting the last of my Stormcast done, or finally knocking out the Grey Hunters and the remaining bits that I wanted for my Space Wolves, which ended up being adding on the entirety of the Indomitus box, to picking up some Tau to do Kill Team with. Getting a hold of a bunch of Custodes and deciding to turn them into a new project. Getting a 3D printer and letting it print some special parts for a couple of new knights so that I could start doing custom knights and adding on to my already wonderful Death Guard. To buying out my son's Imperial Guard and then finding a bunch of add-ons to it and expanding it to a quite large force and just building a bunch of terrain. I'll go over the specific numbers when I get back to the bench, but yeah, I would call 2020 successful. I had hobby goals, and I made them happen. Let's go back to the bench and talk about exactly what we did. 550 figures. Now, what's not on the table is 10 guys that I did, I want to say in August or early September, and they were red and white Marines that I called the Omega Watch, and I painted them up and I tested this test scheme, and I was like, yeah, and then no, I hated the scheme after I looked at it for a couple days. So they all went in the bath. They haven't been repainted yet. But the idea behind them is what turned into the Death Speakers, that new old Marine set I'm working So those 10 guys, they were painted, they were completed, but then they got stripped. So that's 10. I did a Blood Angels captain that got sent away as part of a Christmas exchange, so that's another one. I had 2 figures that I built and subsequently were destroyed. One of the problems with having some figures made out of resin. Resin printers are great, but sometimes they can be brittle, and bad things happen, and sometimes it's easier I can try and fix it, sometimes it's just not worth it. It's easier to chuck it and just reprint it. So they were printed, they were painted, they were done, then they got broke. I chucked them. One of them being that Mortis Dreadnought that I did. I had it for a couple days, and then it got swept off the table by my lovely cat and smashed to smithereens. I was very upset by that. 2 pieces were 2 pieces of terrain that I finished during the week-long Midwinter Minis backlog challenge. 2 of those actually got completed, 2 pieces of terrain. They were part of a test piece I was trying to develop for a modular terrain set that the ease of build didn't go the way I wanted, so I was like, they're nice pieces of terrain, but they're a little too complicated for an easy build. So, and I didn't want to make an entire set out of them, so they're 2 nice pieces. I painted them up, made them look great, finished them that week, and I sent them over to CM Wargames as part of the Pay It Forward box. I figured a couple custom, unique pieces of terrain that are good battlefield terrain. I figured someone that's running battle reports could really use a couple of nice custom pieces from me, the Gamecraft Dragon. So I sent them on their way. Lastly, the 16th figure that's not on the table is a D&D figure for a game that I play with some friends once a month. So I printed out a figure, painted it up, and it's over there, so it's obviously not on the table. I completely forgot about that. So there we go. I had those 16 with everything on the board, and it comes to 550 figures. Quick breakdown looking at that. I actually ran some numbers. 73 orc figures or vehicles. All together between Underworlds and my Stormcast and my Ogor Maw tribes, 75 figures of Age of Sigmar. That also includes the 6 terrain blocking features for Underworlds that I painted up. The Primal Lair set. My new army, my Death Speakers, there's 33 of them painted so far. The Death Guard, there's 66 Death Guard figures. A vast majority of those are Poxwalkers, but there's still 66 Death Guard figures, plus my Nurgle Knight. There's 75 Wolves. Now keep in mind, a lot of that is a bunch of Grey Hunter packs, but it's also the entirety of Indominus, all painted up as Space Wolves, plus 2 Knights that are part of their Russ homeworld. So I've actually got 1 Knight that's actually very wolf themed, and then a smaller Helverin that goes with them. 29 Custodes army, 29 Custodes figures, so like 2-3 armies worth of Custodes. It's actually about 3,000 points of Custodes if I put them all together. And that was kind of on purpose. I went for a specific build so I could kind of swap pieces in and out, but I normally would play it at 2,000 points, but I could, if we wanted to get a 3,000 point game, I'd just take all my stuff and put it on the table, and we're good to go. 13 Tau figures. It's a single kill team box set. Ended up making it 5 breachers and 5 regular fire warriors, and then there's 3 drones, the missile drone and the 2 flying drones. Other than that, there's 41 pieces of actual terrain, whether it's the bulwark or the terrain set out of the command edition of the starter set, plus a couple of plasma coils and 2 of the plasma sets, the plasma tube sets. One of them has lots of pieces are loose. Another one, there's 2 large single pieces I made out of it. Again, trying to do a few things. Wanted to do some nice Battleworks stuff for that. I'm looking to eventually get enough Mechanicus to do an entire Mechanicus board. 5 figures I did for like little single pieces. There's a couple were done for contests. One was done as a paint test because I was trying to test out a scheme. One of them is my assassin because I did do a Vindicare assassin. One was the elf that we got for the November, the free figure for November. I painted up one of the witches, which I thought was pretty cool. Just wanted to give it a figure test, try out some new techniques on that. Did some skin techniques that I hadn't done before. Figured out some cool stuff. And again, the 16 figures that are away. And lastly, the heavy lifter, which was not what I expected, but actually the big heavy lifter this year was 121 Astra Militarum figures. 70 which is just regular rank and file figures. It's been a heck of a year. Those Astra Militarum were my heavy lifters for that week I did for Midwinter Minis. I think I did, of the 97 figures I did that week, I want to say like 75 of them were just Astra Militarum. I want to just knock that army out, just because I knew it was going to be a completely repetitive army. It's mainly 4 colors before washes and highlights. It's just green and black and gray and skin. And green and black and gray and skin. And green and black and gray and skin. And just a lot of them. But that's what we got. The 3D printer helped a lot. I keep pointing at it because my 3D printer is right here. The 3D printer actually had a lot to do with how much painting I did. I was able to print a lot of greebles, a lot of bits, a lot of single figures to fill in squads, things for those knights to fill in. I love the 3D printer. I love it. Gives me some options. That D&D figure I painted was entirely, it was an orc barbarian that I got from Artisans Guild off of Patreon. They're a really great STL provider. So it's been really cool. It's been really great. The printer helped a lot. Just having the motivation to do figures helped. I learned a lot about basing. I really picked up my whole batch painting. I have a real solid batch painting process now where I can sit down with 10, 15, 20, 40 figures if they're all going to have the same paint scheme, and just knock them all out in that same paint scheme, as long as I'm doing them all the same way at the same time. It let me do 15 Death Guard Terminators in 3 days. It let me do 30 Poxwalkers in 2 sessions. Basically 2 2-hour sessions and the Poxwalkers were done. So I did pick up a lot. Like I said, I was talking about earlier, I'm normally a very dark, very dirty, very gritty Blanchitsu type painter, and I tried a couple different techniques, and I'm going to continue on those techniques. I'm not using as much wash. Actually, I'm doing a set of figures coming up that I'm not going to be using virtually any wash. I'm going to be using panel lining, but other than that, I'll be using no wash, just some recess shades, and that's it. But I want to do the army very clean, and that's going to be my new army for 2021, which is Necrons. I have a Necron half of a Indominus Crusade box. I have a half of a what do you call it? A command box worth of Necrons, and then I have, again from that wonderful man Greg, I have the big boy himself. I have the Silent King. So that's going to be, the Necrons I start off with. And after I get closer done with those, we'll see what we're going to do. But I'm not going to start on them right away. I'm actually going to probably hold off on them until mid-spring, only because I've got other pieces I want to finish out first. I've got a bunch of Death Guard that I've still got to finish off, and with them getting a new codex that's going to have at least one new figure in it, I want to get all my Death Guard done, and I've got about 20 or 30 of them ready to go. Primed, some are base coated, but we got to get them finished up. I also have a bunch of orcs I want to get finished. I've only got through about half the orcs that I've primed and prepped. So, I mean, orcs are a horde army. The 75 is not a lot of orcs. So I want to get the rest of those orcs done, get them all put together, and get them painted, and get them done. So I think once I get the orcs and the Death Guard done, I'm going to see where I'm at that point. I also want to keep working on my Death Speakers, but they're one of those armies that I can do one unit at a time, and I can do it as a palette cleanser because they're a very simple paint scheme, very elegant but very simple paint schemes. So I can do a couple units of one thing and then go back, do a unit of Death Speakers, finish that unit, go do a couple more units of the main army I'm working on, then go back, do a unit of Death Speakers. The Death Speakers are going to be an ongoing project too. I have figures for them for probably a couple years worth of building, to be honest with you. I've got an entire Dark Imperium box worth of Primaris for them. So eventually they will have Primaris. Because I've got a Dark Imperium box for them and an Indominus box of figures for them, ready to go. They'll go with them. But before I even get to them, I have a Battle Force box, the old 2012 Battle Force box for the Marines. I've got at least 6 squads of either the early monopose plastic, where it's one-piece plastic with the weapon that bolts on, Marine mold that I want to do with them, or I've got 4 or 5 boxes of lead, or I should say pewter and plastic. It's going to need super glue to put together. Marines. I've got a couple boxes of that left to do to put together for them. And then I've got a bunch of just pure lead Marines, or pure pewter Marines, that are going to be just for them as well. So they're going to be a slow grow build. They're going to be, as I finish units, they get built out. And as they go, they go. They're nothing I'm going to rush on. But they're just an ongoing project of love. So that's the goal. That's the goal for 2021. I know we're going to do a lot more terrain. The goal is to actually do a lot more terrain builds. My goal next year is not about minis. I've already proven that if I just crack down on minis, I can do a ton. So that's not my focus this year. For 2021, my goal is going to be doing terrain projects. January is going to be Necron month. I want to do 2 Necron projects. February is going to be finishing the gate, so I'll be doing the gate for that Imperial Fortress build. Finally, I'll be finally doing that then. And then I want to do at least 1 terrain project a month throughout the year. So we'll see how that goes. It's not a promise, but it's a hope. So I think that's everything. So I guess the biggest takeaways I have, the more you paint, the more you learn. I learned a lot this year. I learned a lot about how paints work. I tried a lot of new techniques, oil washes, using watered down contrasts and putting them through an airbrush, camouflage techniques, a lot of new basing techniques. Some things worked, some things didn't. We'll see how things go from this point forward. But this should be an encouragement. I am not an amazing painter. I'm a pretty average painter. I'm a pretty okay painter. But it's cohesiveness. Painting an entire unit that looks identical. That's the hard part. And if you do the same thing enough times, you get good at doing that thing really well. And it's all about practice and execution. So if you're looking at painting and you're intimidated by it, don't be. Just grab some paints and go in there. I mean, if they don't work out and you just absolutely hate it, you can always go get some Super Clean or some LA Awesome and strip them bad boys and start over. And it doesn't hurt anything to do it because you're just taking off the paint and putting it back on. So don't be afraid to paint. Paint, 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 and see what you can do. I'm Big D. And remember, epic your board, epic your game. And most certainly, at Bigger Table. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in 2021.